Path Media.
But she also, right now, in the situation, is faced with not having any agency, not having any purpose, right? Not even being a contributing factor to the rebellion, right? To the cause, and in fact, having been the reason why somebody had to get killed.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this rushed adventure, for no other reason than I'm a little rushed right now. I'm releasing this episode late, so it's one of those situations where I'm recording, producing, and releasing the episode on the same day. I wasn't able to record on my regular recording day, but I still wanted to make sure I get one out this week. I'm doing my best to stay consistent on a week to week, and so far this year we haven't missed a week yet. So I want to keep that streak going with this, and of course we want to continue that conversation, the conversation about Andor, right? Such a great show. We're going to be talking about Andor Season 2, Episode 4 this week, Ever Been to Ghorman? There's so much in this episode. I think I say that about every episode of Andor, but because this is the first episode in the next year, right? In the next block of episodes, right? So they're doing 1 year for every 3 episodes, and this one. First of all, I do want to say that I love how it starts off with the bells and marking that it's 1 year later. So every 3 episodes, I'm assuming, is going to be like that, right? For every year, the bells are going to toll, so to speak. So yeah, that's always really cool. But lots of detail because again, this is the first in this next kind of batch of story arc. Lots of plot and lots of stuff to catch up on because again, a year has gone by. So much that we could talk about, but I want to get into it because again, we are in a little bit of a rush situation. If you haven't seen this episode yet, if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it and then come back in case I reveal any spoilers. I don't want to be the reason why I spoil this show for you, or at least this episode for you. I'm assuming you've already watched it, but just in case, go ahead and watch it first before you listen to this episode of Path of the Jedi.
I'm going in. Cover me, Porkins.
In my multiple rewatches of this episode, one particular theme really just kept jumping out at me, and the more I watched it, which I watched this episode a lot. Well, I watched all of these. I review these episodes quite a number of times to prepare for the weekly Path of the Jedi. But the more I rewatched it, the more this particular theme started to jump out to me, and I see it really in almost all the different plot lines that happen. And so for today, what we're gonna do is answer Cassian's question when he and Bix are kind of having this argument, and he asked, "What am I doing wrong?" On the surface, it seems like they're arguing about Bix's safety, her mental health, right, with the PTSD, even about the individual who we can assume was part of their team somehow, or they were on a mission together, but this guy ended up being a mole for the Empire and had to be killed, right? He's just, casualty of war. All valid reasons for this argument, and they do discuss all these things. However, I think there is something deeper that's happening. There's a deeper dynamic happening between the two of them in this very specific moment in time in their relationship and in the storyline. But to get to what that deeper dynamic is that's happening, what the deeper tension is between these two, in order to answer that question, I actually want to take the story to Wilmon first. Wilmon. We see towards the end of this episode, that Wilmon has been commissioned by Saw Gerrera. The incomparable Forrest Whitaker has returned reprise his role as Saw Gerrera. In the scene, we see Willmon has been commissioned by Saw Gerrera to teach his team how to use this particular piece of machinery, a very dangerous piece of machinery at that. And Will thought that he was just going to show up, teach him the thing, and be out of there the next day. However, Saw decides otherwise. Saw decides for Will that he's going to stay longer and teach the machine top to bottom, the complete, all the different variations of whatever he needs to teach. And, that's going to take as long as it's going to need to take. Basically, he's removed, he's removed the freedom of choice, right? He's taken Willmon's freedom of choice away from him. I think this is really important to consider, especially when examining what the other characters in this episode are going through. Let's take the story to Mon Mothma, who at this time is on Coruscant, and she's campaigning. She's working to get votes for something that she's trying to get passed in the Senate. I can't remember exactly what. It had to do a lot with Ghorman. Obviously, this episode is really starting to. Things are starting to converge around Ghorman and the situation that's happening there. But she's going from senator to senator. People who were we can I think safely assume that were her allies in the past in the Senate, right? People that seemed, to her at least, the people that she could count on for things, and who she has supported as well. But it seems that they're all kind of abandoning her on this, and nobody wants to vote for this initiative. Even the senator from Ghorman himself, which for Mon is like absolutely baffling, because this thing that she's trying to pass is for the benefit of Ghorman. So yeah, she's kind of stuck in this situation where her hands are tied. Right, her hands are tied. No matter how hard she's working, nothing is going her way, and she's losing more and more control of the situation. It almost feels like the bill that she's trying to get passed is being hijacked by by all kinds of things. These senators that supposedly were her allies, and of course lots of unseen forces and machinations in the background from the Empire and from the Emperor himself. So yeah, it really feels like her hands are tied, very much as Willmon's hands are tied. So it feels very constrained, right, and limited. Okay, so then let's take the story to Cyril, who actually is, he's thriving, right? Quite the opposite of Willmon and Mon, Willmon and Mon, Will and Mon, whose hands are tied and they feel kind of very constrained in the situations that they're in. Well, Cyril is thriving, and in fact, he is on Ghorman. He's on Ghorman. He's the head of the department that he's been assigned to. He has a lot of underlings. Like he's killing it, basically. Of course, to his mom, it's a different situation, but he knows, he feels good. He feels empowered. He feels like he's doing a great job. And on top of that, he is actually running a covert operation. Cyril is running a covert operation with Dedra, nonetheless. So yeah, again, he seems to be really, really thriving, as opposed to his previous situation when he was living with his mother. I think the turnaround in this is that his relationship with Dedra has really opened up a lot of things for him. He definitely has more support and more autonomy, right, to self-actualize, to be more of who he really is, or at least who he wants to be. He never had any of that with his mother, for sure. His abusive mother, and I was about to say toxic, but that's too light a word. I think she's definitely abusive, manipulative, narcissistic, and was keeping him in prison. And we get that scene from, I think, episode 2 or maybe 3, where Edie meets Dedra for the first time, and and Cyril is just like flopped over on his bed, like completely exasperated, and like when it comes to his mother, it's like he has zero say say. He has zero voice. He has zero choice and freedom and anything like that. So now that he's kind of free from her, because of Dedra, right? Dedra really helped him gain that freedom. He's thriving. Right, he is thriving. He again has the autonomy. He's able to self-actualize, and I think it really is a matter of him having agency in this episode. And again, a complete contrast to Mon Mothma and to Wilmon, right? Who in their situations are very constrained. I think this is really, when you look at the big picture of this entire episode of Andor, I think it's a central theme to this episode. At least the central theme that I want to focus on today, because it speaks very, very much to what Bix is going through right now, and also on top of this theme being the central theme, I think Bix is the central character to this episode. I mean, the episode starts off with her, right, and showing us her mental state. I think Bix is unsatisfied. She feels restless. Of course, there's the trauma, and I'm no trauma expert, and I don't want to get into that necessarily in this episode. But again, speaking specifically to the situations that she's in right now, the thing that she's arguing for with Cassian is the fact that she has nothing to do. Right? She has nothing to do. She has lost her agency, and she understands, she understands that Cassian is trying to protect her and to keep her safe, and that they always, he always wants them to be together, and it's a fair question for Cassian to ask. I think I don't think there's any wrong or right. Neither of them are in the wrong or in the right, because they're just trying to navigate a really difficult situation. Cassian wants to protect her as much as he can. He doesn't want to lose her again. Again, that's fair, especially after everything that she's gone through when they were separated. Right, when she was taken by the Empire and tortured and gone through all that trauma. Right. He doesn't want that for her anymore. So he's doing what he can to protect her, but at the same time, in doing so, he's robbing her of her agency. So not only is she, having to deal with this mental health issue and, the PTSD and, the hallucinations and things like that, right? But she also, right now in the situation, is faced with not having any agency, not having any purpose, right? Not even being a contributing factor to the rebellion, right? To the cause. And in fact, having been the reason why somebody had to get killed, right? Not only is she, again, not an active participant right now, but she's causing people to get killed. So it's just really, it's a lot. It's a lot for her to swallow. It's a lot for her to deal with. And she tells Cassian, look, this is just the nature of the thing. And I think what's really interesting is that when you think about it, Bix was the one that got Cassian into the rebellion in the first place. If you go all the way back to the first season, I don't know that Cassian would be a part of this movement. Well, I mean, I think he might have been in some form or another eventually. But in this universe, he was brought into the situation through Bix. Right, and because of Bix, she was instrumental in actually his introduction to Cassian's introduction to Luthen, and now, and again, this is not like a blame or finger pointing situation, but now she's being, her purpose and her agency is being has been stripped from her, right, and largely it's Cassian that's doing that. Again, all valid and all fair, but it's just a really, really crappy situation to be in, and we see at the end of this episode that there's another underlying there's another layer to the stuff that Bix is going on with substance abuse, or at least we can assume is substance abuse. I'm sure we'll see more of that in the subsequent episodes. Well, I mean, I'm assuming we will, because they made a real point to show it at the end of this episode. So yeah, Bix is going through a lot, and it's just heartbreak. And for me, watching this episode, I feel like Man, I don't think we're gonna see Bix survive this series. I mean, we didn't see her in Rogue One, so obviously there are a lot of people that don't make it, to that part of the story. And if that's the case, then it also makes a tremendous amount of sense why Cassian was so jaded and angry by the time we get to Rogue One, and it took Jyn Erso to kind of break those barriers down, but yeah, he was just all business by the time we get to Rogue One. So yeah, really a kind of a heartbreak scenario for Bix, and well, heartbreak not only because we can assume that she's not going to make it through this series, but everything that she's struggling through right now, currently, right, in this situation, and beautifully portrayed and performed by Adria or Arjana, I think is how to pronounce it. But yeah, real heartbreak scenario, and the central theme again for this entire episode, we see the characters who don't have agency or have less agency. They're the constraints put them in a tough situation, and we see the ones that do, and we see those individuals thriving, right? And so to answer Cassian's question, what am I doing wrong? Well, he has inadvertently, as well-meaning as he has inadvertently taken Bix's agency, right? And her purposefulness, her choice, her freedom of choice, and so not only is she dealing with this with all this trauma and this PTSD, but now she has loss of freedom and choice to do anything about it, right? She has lost agency to take control of her own destiny, of her own situation, and I can understand why she might feel in despair, and why she might turn to substances to make her feel better, at the very least to help her sleep, for crying out loud, right? So yeah, really tough, really tough, and again, I think that is the central theme to this particular episode, and I'm not an expert on trauma, but I will say this about it. I think at one point or another in our lives, we all will experience a similar situation, if you haven't already, a situation where we want to do what's best for somebody that we care deeply about. We want to help, we're going to need to and want to help somebody that we care deeply about. I urge caution, though, when you do this, because there is a distinct difference. There is a hard line difference between what is best for an individual and what you think is best for an individual. And they might be completely different things, right? They might be completely different things. So, as you are giving help and giving support to somebody that you care for, and you want to see get better or do better or be well, be careful of the kind of help that you're giving, because you may inadvertently, like Cassian, be taking control away from that individual. You may be taking agency away. Now, this is not to speak of cases where an intervention needs to happen, or if there's self-harm and that you really need to step in. Like that's a different, that's pretty extreme case. But in other cases, our help, sometimes as well-meaning as it is, it might do the opposite, right? And in fact, if you look at the relationship right now with Bix and Cassian, or even if you look at the relationship between Cyril and his mother, Edie, if this dynamic persists, if there's that imbalance and one person has lost agency and control, it can cause a rift in the relationship, right? And in Bix's case specifically, it can actually even drive the individual deeper and deeper into the darkness and into the hole or whatever it is that they're going through right now. So we have to really be mindful of this. I totally understand that, when our loved ones are struggling, we want to help them, right? We want to support them and we want to do what's best for them. But we have to be careful not to inadvertently, in giving our help and giving our support, inadvertently take away their control, take away their choice, take away their agency. Because when that happens, not only can it push that person deeper into a sense of despair and helplessness, but it can push that person away from you. And that's the episode. That's the episode. I think that I think that's really the reason. I think that's the primary driver of this. I don't want to say rift, but maybe this unease in the household, in the Bix and Cassian household, because Bix doesn't feel like she has any say or any control or choice in her own life, really, right? Again, as I mentioned earlier, she was the one that got Cassian into this thing, and now she's kind of been sidelined and not given a choice in her level of participation anymore, right? I can understand why she's starting to feel frustrated and maybe in despair, maybe in helplessness, and that's of course compounded with the PTSD, the hallucinations, the mental health and the trauma and all that stuff. Again, I'm not an expert on trauma, so I can't really address any of that, but there's some interesting dynamics happening, and I know we on this show focus a lot more on personal growth and lessons and principles that kind of help us on our own journeys, but I think this does that in a way, in really, I think, talking about giving healthier forms of help, and again, I know it's all usually well-meaning, but sometimes we can be overbearing. We really can, and I don't know. I guess for me, I've always hated hearing people say, "I know what's best for you." Right? I think that's the biggest load of malarkey, and for the most part, people do it with good intention. Sometimes it's like in Edie's case, it's just an arrogance, right, and a narcissism, and this kind of very, very abusive and toxicity. I can hurl all these labels at Edie, but I think for the most part, people do have good intentions when they say that. But it still drives me up the wall because again, it takes away. It strips away choice and agency and control from the individual that you're talking to. So try not to do that. Try not to do that. Of course, in cases that are more extreme, then you need to step in and remove choice from an individual. There are those cases, but that doesn't often happen, and usually there's a few more steps before you get there, right? There's other things that you can try first before taking somebody's choice and agency away. Anywho, I hope at least some of this made sense to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section of the YouTube version, or you can click the send a text link on the podcast version. I'd be happy to continue this discussion further. Of course, you can connect with me on Blue Sky. It's a great place. I absolutely love Blue Sky, and that's kind of my main social platform at the moment. So yeah, find me on Blue Sky. I'll leave a link to my Blue Sky in the show notes of this episode as well, and we can discuss it further. Okay, now it's time for the shout out. All right, this week's shout out goes to Greg McLaughlin of the Rebel Base Card Podcast. That's right, Greg McLaughlin of the Rebel Base Card Podcast. This is a great podcast that I just in the last handful of months, I think, started listening to. Let me read you the about section for the show itself. We talk about trading cards, collecting, and people in the Star Wars community. It's about enjoying your passion and discovering new aspects of a galaxy far, far away. So lots of reasons to love this show. Obviously, Star Wars. Star Wars. And, it's actually an aspect of Star Wars that I'm not versed in at all. When I first started listening to Greg on this show, it really opened up my world to another aspect of Star Wars collecting, trading cards. That's one thing. I need another habit. But I definitely, listening to to how passionate Greg is and his guests are about the Star Wars trading cards and really all things Star Wars and geekdom. It inspires me. Again, it just gets me jazzed and excited about the Star Wars universe and being a fan that now I can take that fandom to down a different road, right? Down the trading card road. So really interesting stuff. Greg is a great host. He's so knowledgeable about trading cards. He's incredibly knowledgeable about Star Wars. And in fact, they've just been doing what's it called? Andor wrap-ups and analyses, discussions on that. So yeah, I've been really listening to those now that I'm kind of halfway caught up. But it's just an all-around good show. Greg has great perspectives. He has tremendous amount of knowledge to share, and we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to get him on the show on Path of the Jedi here sometime soon. But yeah, I really appreciate Greg for his expertise, his knowledge of Star Wars and of trading cards, opening me up to the Star Wars trading card world, and sharing his perspective every week. Sharing that passion and that love for Star Wars every week, in a way that I hadn't necessarily been exposed to before in the past. So it's really fun. It's really fun I guess that's the thing I'm most appreciative about, is that Greg has helped expand my passion for Star Wars now that he's opened my world up to the trading card aspect. So Greg, hopefully, if you're listening to this, which I hope you are, I just want to say thank you. Keep up the great work over there at the Rebel Base Card Podcast, which, by the way, I'll leave a link to his show in the show notes of today's episode. But Greg, again, if you're out there listening, thank you so much. This week's shout out goes to you. Okay, one last thing. Again, I would love to ask your help to grow this show. If you're not already following the show, that is the single best thing you can do to help us grow the show. When the algorithm sees who's following and the number of new followers every day, it pushes it out to more people. It says to itself, oh yeah, more and more people are following the show or subscribing to the show. Let's get it out to more people. So that will be the single best thing you can do to help us grow this show. And then the second best thing you can do is share it, right? If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed the content and the message and the stuff that we talked about, please share it, right? Just think of one person who you think might appreciate and enjoy the content as well, and smash that share button. Takes 3 to 5 seconds, and we'll be off to the races. Either way, whichever one of those that you do, or if you don't do any of them, I appreciate you. I'm eternally grateful to you for hanging out with us today.
Classified, really? Me too. Big secret.
You can, of course, catch us next week with a fresh new one. We're going to be talking about Andor Season 2, Episode 5. So until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.